Yep, another bomb version of the show, and again I apologise for another delayed Grand Prix review. I'm busy at weekends sometimes, and so I can't watch the race and watch it the next day. And if it's a Spanish Grand Prix, I didn't know how to tackle this review because of what's been happening since then, and especially what was announced today. But for this Power Oversteer, I thought I'll get the old bingo sheet out for the Power Oversteer bingo. So yeah, this is the Spanish Grand Prix bingo sheet. So in this, well, I call it bingo. You don't actually have to get all of them, but you just get three in a row, like Grosjean DRS to Maldonado, or Grosjean best drivers in the world to unpredictable. So if you got your bingo sheet out, the winners or the winner or the winning row for this review is actually Pirelli tyres, DRS, and left front. So yeah, those are going to be mentioned the most in this review. So if you got that row, well done to you. You win a Pirelli marble off a tyre, probably. Just go to Spain, they probably have it collected in a bin somewhere. So yeah, well done to you, whoever won the Spanish Grand Prix review Power Oversteer bingo. I'll do this again for the next Power Oversteer review, and that'll be next month. I can't remember what Grand Prix, it'll probably be the British Grand Prix. So yeah, remember to keep the sheet safe, and yeah, well done to whoever won the Power Oversteer bingo there. Roll it. Hey, I'm Kev Kerr, Mr. Kerr, and welcome to Power with Silver Motorsport Show on the ElusiveKev channel. And in today's show, we're doing a review of the Spanish Grand Prix, the 5th round of the 2013 FIA Formula 1 World Championship. And at the start of the European season, lots of updates to every car. So in the end, the order wasn't really that much changed, but there were a couple improvements down the field, and there was a couple of talking points throughout this Grand Prix, and the main talking point, again, has been those stuff that the only things on these cars that keep them that are in contact with the road, those brown to black things called tyres. So yeah, that might be talked a bit about in the winners and losers section. Of course, we've got drive of the race, team of the race, and overtake of the race as well to talk about. But firstly, we always start with the race recap. So yes, the race recap, and as you probably saw in the bingo, yeah, you're gonna hear Pirelli tyres, DRS, and their front a lot in this race recapping in the winners and losers section as well, probably. But starting on this race recap, I actually started on the warm-up lap with Vettel going, they are going ridiculously slow again, tell them to hurry up on the warm-up lap. And many drivers are going to have problems with slow Mercedes in this race, unfortunately. But at the start, Vettel had a good start, went round the outside of Hamilton into turn 1 as Hamilton locked up majorly, and Alonso then went round the outside of Raikkonen and Hamilton in turn 3. An amazing, daring move on the first few corners from Alonso. Again, a dreadful start for Webber, and he was down to 12th after the first lap, and I think he said he was down further down the field than that. But at the end of the first lap, we also saw Perez and Massa fighting for 6th. Sutil was up to 8th, and so the order was Rosberg leading from Vettel with Alonso, Hamilton, and Raikkonen behind. Perez was defending from Massa with Sutil, Grosjean, and the rest completing the top 10. Webber was in 11th, Verne, Hulkenberg, Ricciardo, Maldonado, Gutierrez, Button down to 17th after his dreadful qualifying. Bottas, Van der Garde leading the newer teams, Chilton, Bianchi, and Pick. And on that too, Massa down the start, finished straight, used DR. Well, he didn't use DRS, he just went round the outside of Perez for 6th. And then he also set the fastest lap that lap with a 1:30.339. Van der Garde actually got past Bottas down the field for 18th, and you're going to see lots of Caterham and Williams fighting later in the race as well. On that 3, there was a bit of a pattern emerging. The group of 6 and then a group behind, with Perez down to Bottas in 19th. There was heard some Rosberg team radio with rear tyres 17. I think it said 17, or rear tyres width or window, I think, and it was really important to look after the left rear. So already on that 3 they're talking about conserving these tyres. On that 5, Button said it feels like I can't get any heat into these tyres. He's never had that problem in the past, so don't know what was what with that. On lap 6, in the group of 6 at the front split into group of 3s, and Perez in Cobra behind. Raikkonen defended from Massa into turn 7, and Bianchi was way down. It seemed like he pitted early on as he was 20 odd seconds behind everyone else at the back of the field. That 7, Raikkonen was down the inside of Hamilton into turn 10. Webber was told to box, and he did at the end of that for hards, and was out in 21st after a 3.4 second stop. That paid Massa went round the outside of Hamilton in turn 10. Then Massa, Sutil, Hulkenberg, Grosjean, Pick, and Maldonado all pitted. Maldonado, he tried to pit in the Sauber one though, and then he quickly realised he had to go past and went into the Williams pits. Yeah, Sauber, they finished ahead of you last year, Pasta. You're further down the pit lane. Grosjean crabbed into the pit lane though, unfortunately, and he had suspension failure and was retired. Sutil had an extra long pit stop as well on this go, but he eventually went out, and it would really cost him hit the rest of the race. Lap 9, Alonso, Hamilton, De Resta and Verne all pitted, and Alonso was out behind Button in 8th as Button was doing a free stopper. Hamilton with a 5-second stop, so a bit of tardiness from Mercedes on that stop, and De Resta out ahead of Max Chilton, who was staying out really long on that first stint. Webber set the fastest lap of 1:29.767 on his new hard tyres. Lap 10, Rosberg, Vettel, Raikkonen and Perez all pitted. Massa set the fastest lap of 1:28.778, and Rosberg was out in 2nd, while Alonso split them. He split Rosberg and Vettel, and he also saw Raikkonen come out behind Button. Lap 11, drive-through penalty for Maldonado for speeding in the pit lane, probably speeding away from the Sauber pits, that's why. Button pitted and came out in 16th. On the next lap, Rosberg defended from Alonso in turn 5, while Gutierrez was leading an F1 race for the first time as he stayed out. Lap 13, Alonso DRS Rosberg round the outside into turn 1 for 2nd. Rosberg defended from Vettel in turn 5, but Vettel had the inside line for turn 7. Then Massa also DRS Rosberg round the outside into turn 10. Rosberg got a bit mugged on that lap. Pick was past Chilton for 18th in the battle of the newer teams, and Gutierrez finally pitted from the lead and was out in 13th. Lap 15, Raikkonen DRS Rosberg down the inside into turn 1 for 4th, and he was the only guy on soft tyres in the front pack. Ricciardo DRS Hamilton for 9th in the same spot, and Chilton pitted and came out in 20th. That 16, Bottas was back past Van der Garde, and Bianchi pitted and was out in 21st. So on that 17, about the quarter-way marker, just over it, the order was Alonso leading by about 3 seconds from Vettel, with Massa 1.7 seconds behind him in 3rd. Raikkonen was 1.6 seconds further back in 4th, and just over 4 seconds ahead of Rosberg. Webber was 4 seconds behind Rosberg, with Perez less than a second behind him. Dios was about 1.6 seconds further back in 8th, with Ricciardo right behind him, and Hamilton was almost 2.5 seconds back behind them, and already 20 seconds off the lead in 10th. Hulkenberg was over 2.5 seconds off a point, with Verne just a second behind him, and Gutierrez right behind Verne in a Sauber sandwich. Button was 4.5 seconds down in 14th, and Bottas was 9 seconds back on the McLaren in 15th. Maldonado was right behind his teammate, with Van der Garde just 2.5 seconds behind him, ahead of Pick. Then Sutil was 19 seconds back and over a minute off the lead in 19th, with Bianchi 30 seconds behind him, and Chilton just behind his teammate and 75 seconds off the lead instead. Sorry about that. But on lap 18 then, Webber had trouble with the front left mate, and Gutierrez down the inside of Verne into turn 10 for 12th. Lap 19, Ricciardo DRS De Resta around the outside into turn 1 for 8th, and then De Resta pitted and came out in 14th. Lap 20, Massa pitted after saying he had problems with the front left front on his team radio, and Massa was out in 7th after a 3.1 second stop. Webber also pitted and was out in 12th after a 2.9 second stop, and Van der Garde also pitted and came out in 21st. On lap 21, Alonso pitted from the lead and was out in 4th after a 3.8 second stop. Hulkenberg also pitted. Massa was past Ricciardo in turn 7, and DRS Perez down the back straight to get back into the top 5. That 22, Van der Garde was like, what the fuck, I think my wheel is about to fall off or something. And then the team told him to try and get back to the pits. But you never guess, his wheel did fall off on the next lap out of turn 10. And then he kind of free rolled it into the pits lane, and he eventually made it back, but, you know, retired soon after. Massa was setting the fastest lap though with a 1:28.132. That 23, Alonso, DRS, Rosberg were third down that front straight. Webber, DRS, Button for 10th, with Hulkenberg and Vern DRS in Bottas for 13th. Van der Garde, as I said, did make it back, while Perez pitted and came out in 13th behind Hulkenberg. Alonso set the fastest out of the race with a 1:27.731. Charles Pico also pitted, and Gutierrez was past Hamilton in turn 5, and Webber was past Hamilton in turn 7. That 24, Massa, DRS, Rosberg down the front straight for third. Vettel pitted from the lead with Raikkonen right behind him now. After a 2.6 second start, Vettel came out in 5th behind Rosberg. Webber, DRS, Gutierrez for 7th down the front straight. That 25, Vettel, DRS, Rosberg for 4th down the front straight. The rest DRS, Hamilton down the back straight for 9th, and Hamilton pitted and came out in 14th after a front row start. That 26, Raikkonen pitted from the lead, and well, Alonso gaining on all the time, but he was out in 4th just ahead of Rosberg after a 3.5 second start. Hamilton passed Maldonado in turn 10 for 14th. That 27, DRS Button down the front straight for 9th, and Vettel radio. Left front is critical. Left front. Rosberg pitted from 5th and came out in 11th after 3.6 second stop. That 28, Ricciardo, DRS Vern for 12th, or they were on different strategies, so Vern just let him through. Hamilton now have been overtaken by Williams. He was not impressed after Maldonado got past him, but Hamilton was back past Maldonado in turn 4 for 14th. Button pitted for the second time and came out in 13th ahead of the battle. At 29, Chilton was the only driver down at 30. Hamilton rear left, reaching the top of the window now. I can't drive any slower, he says though. Bianchi pitted and was out ahead of the battle for 3rd now, with Raikkonen right behind Vettel. Alonso had a problem with the front left, or left front, and Chilton pitted from just in front of his teammate there. And on the next lap, Vettel defended from Raikkonen into turn 10, but on that 33, Raikkonen made his road down the inside of Vettel into turn 1 for 3rd, and the crowd was jumping round. And then Ricciardo, DRS, Perez down the front straight for 9th. So on that 34, the order was Alonso leading by 13 seconds from Massa, with Raikkonen 6 seconds back behind the Ferrari man. Vettel was over 2 seconds behind the Lotus man in 4th, with Webber 12 seconds behind his teammate. But he was 11 seconds ahead of the rest, with Rosberg and Hulkenberg 4 seconds behind the Force India driver. Ricciardo was 2.5 seconds back of Hulk, with Perez 2.5 seconds back of him in 10th and 53.4 seconds off the lead. Vern and Gutierrez were second of the point, with Button 5.6 seconds back in 13th, with Hamilton 5 seconds behind his former McLaren teammate. Maldonado was 8 seconds behind Hamilton, with Bottas 7 seconds behind his teammate, and Sutil catching him only 2 seconds behind him. Pick, Bianchi and Chilton were all a lap down at the back, but the action on this lap was Rosberg, DRS, Hulk down the front straight for 7th, and then Hulkenberg and Vern pitted and collided in the pit lane when Hulkenberg was released from his pit lane and Vern was going in to his pit stop, and so the front wing of Hulkenberg was damaged and he would have to pit for a new one on the next lap, while Vern had damage to the rear of his car. On that 35, Massa was told to start using curves on the exit turns 4 and 5, with Raikkonen catching him. On that 36, Alonso pitted for the 3rd time and went on to mediums. After a 3.2 second stop, he was out in 2nd. Massa also pitted on this lap for doing a double pit stop, but it worked out as he was out in 4th after a 3.1 second stop. Webber pitted and came out in 10th. Hamilton pitted from 12th, and Webber then was past Gutierrez and Perez up to 8th. Hamilton was past Vern for 12th, with Bottas falling through into 13th. On that 38, Hulk was given a stop-go for that unsafe release, and Verne was still on the exit of turn 10 with an exploded right rear tyre. That happened down the exit of turn 3, if I remember correctly. Quite scary to watch. On that 39, Alonso DRS Raikkonen down the front straight for the lead, and the crowd jumped around. Webber DRS Rosberg for 5th, while Sutil set the fastest out of the race in 15th, charging through the field with a 1:26.564. Vettel pitting was out in 4th after a 3.5 second stop, and Verne came in for some new tyres and was out in last. Gutierrez defended from Button in turn 1 for 7th, and Gutierrez was told to push. But on the next lap, Button made his way past Gutierrez with DRS into turn 1 for 7th. On that 42, Button was told, great job, now in clear, let's push on ahead, careful with the left front. Sutil was past Maldonado for 13th as Pick pitted and came out in 18th. Hulk went past Bianchi for 16th. For that 44, Vettel radio was, now you can use up your tyres, and guessing he's at the end of his stint. And Verne was past Chilton for 19th. For that 45, Raikkonen pitted for the third and final time to go onto the hard tyres, came out in third after a 3.5 second start. At 46, Button pitted for his final time for his third and final time and came out in 12th. At 47, Bianchi pitted for the final time and came out in 19th. At 48, Gutierrez was past Hamilton for 10th, and Chilton pitted for the final time from last. At 49, Alonso pitted for the final time from the lead and came out in the lead after a 2.2 stop, and he also had a puncture on his tyre, so he pitted just the nick of time. At 50, Sutil pitted for the final time, Button DRS'd Hamilton down the front straight for 11th. Who would have thought that before the race? Webber pitted from 5th, and Perez pitted from 7th. So the order of play with 15 laps remaining was Alonso leading by 5.5 seconds from Massa, with Raikkonen 2.5 seconds behind Massa. Vettel was 10.7 seconds back in 4th, with Webber 11.7 seconds behind his teammate in 5th. The rest is now 16.4 seconds behind Webber, with Perez and Ricciardo 8 seconds behind him. Rosberg with 8 seconds behind Ricciardo in 9th, and Gutierrez 1.5 seconds back of Rosberg in 10th, and 65.6 seconds off the lead. Button was 4 seconds behind, with Hamilton a second back in 12th. Maldonado was 11 seconds back in 13th, with Sutil a lap down and catching Maldonado. But Sutil was ahead of Hulk, the former Force India driver. Bottas, Pick, Verne, Bianchi and Chilton, Hamilton, Vettel, Ricciardo and Massa all pitted for the final time on this lap 51. And on that 52, Webber DRS the Resta for 5th down the front straight after his stop. That 53, Pick and Verne, they were batting like a hell. That 54, Verne radio was boxed, we need to retire, damage on the left rear, and he duly did. The rest of pitted and came out behind Rosberg in 7th. For that 55, Hamilton and Sutil were battling like a hell. Gutierrez pitted for the final time from 8th and came out in 11th. Rosberg defended from the rest into turn 1. At 57, Gutierrez set the fastest out of the race with a 1:26.217 on his fresh tyres, and that was the fastest out of the race for the first fastest lap for the Mexican in Formula 1. At 58, Button and Perez were not battling like a hell. On lap 60, Perez radio was, we do need to make sure we get to the end of the race. We can't afford to damage the tyres too much getting past Jensen. Bit of a warning now, I'm guessing. Lap 61, Massa complained of too much oversteer. Lap 63, Rosberg defended from the rest in turns 1 and 4 well. Ricciardo, Gutierrez, Hamilton, Sutil and Bottas Pick all battled, but in the end the finishing order was Alonso winning from Raikkonen by 9.338 seconds. Massa was 26.04, 9 seconds behind his teammate, and Vettel was 38.273 seconds off the lead, with Webber just over 9 seconds behind his teammate. Rosberg was a minute and 8 seconds off the lead in 6th, with the rest of right behind him. Button was 11 seconds behind that battle for 6th in 8th, just ahead of his teammate Perez in 9th. Ricciardo got the final lap of the race and was actually the first car a lap down, just ahead of Gutierrez, with Hamilton in 12th, Cecil 13th, Maldonado 14th, Hulkenberg 15th, Bottas just holding off Pick for 16th. Bianchi was 18th, 2 laps down, with Chilton in 19th. Verne van der Garde and Grosjean were the only retirements of the race. And some interesting facts for this race: Alonso now unofficially, I'm not sure if it's official, but has the longest stretch of non-mechanical retirements. 60 races now, the last one being Malaysia 2010, and he collected his Spanish flag on the warm down lap, and he was kind of meant to be warned, I think, about it. You're not meant to collect stuff on the warm down lap like he did at Valencia last year as well, but the rule wasn't enforced and it should probably be scrapped now. We also saw Caterham get fined €10,000 for that unsafe release of Van der Garde, and it was actually mainly because they instructed him to drive back even though they were aware of a wheel not being fitted properly. So that is the race recap. Let's go to the winners and losers. So the winners and losers from this Spanish Grand Prix, and it's actually unfortunately going to be a familiar tune, because out of 5 races this year, this is the 3rd time I think I've said F1 has been the loser actually out of all of this, and this is because of the show, because of the balance of the show, and how it's perceived that the balance of the show is too much on tyre management after this race, where we've had 79 pit stops and we had a 4-stop winner, just like in 2011 though, when Sebastian Vettel won with 4 stops, pit on similar laps as Alonso. There was around 79 pit stops in that race, and there weren't as many complaints back then as they are now. So there seems to have been a difference from back then to now, and it might be a difference of what we expect now from F1, what we expect from the show. Back in 2011, it was very different from 2010, from the Bridgestone era, where we had 1 pit stop, and that's because of the 2-tyre compound rule. Now we expect 2 to 3 stops, and we expect that it's going to be in that window. It's not going to be 1 stop or 4 stop. It's going to be 2 to 3 stops. That's what Prix have been told to do. That's what the FIA, that's what the teams expect. And so when it's not quite in that window, there's a backlash, and Prix unfortunately have been on the sharp end of that since the race. And in reaction to this, they've kind of changed their tyres. They have changed their tyres from Canada onwards. So Monaco is going to be the soft and super soft, just like normal with the 2013 construction, and then from Canada onwards it's going to be a mix of 2012 and 2013 construction on the tyres. And so, you know, it's kind of Prix kind of admitting fault with these 2013 tyres, and you know how they kind of didn't work like they expected. Then, you know, they said they had data in the wind tunnels on these tyres, and the data is a bit different in the cars, because the cars have much more downforce than they had last year, and they're seconds per lap quicker than they were last year. You know, downforce levels closer to 2011 than last year, and so probably kind of not expecting that. It seems that it's been their tyres that are kind of, you know, seen the spent force of that. And you know, we do see the tyres, you know, tear up quite a lot. We've seen it delaminations, I think that's how you say it, quite in the last couple of races, for Massa, for Verne, for the Resta in practice in Spain. But the good thing about the construction of these tyres is that even if the tread on top is gone, the construction of the tyre is still in place. It's kind of encased in this like silver lining it looks like in the tyre. So even if it's a puncher, let's say 170 miles per hour, when Verne's tyre went to pieces at around, I don't know, 130 miles per hour, I would guess, you can still drive back to the pit lane on that tyre. It's not just going to be a sudden deflation and, you know, send the car into a barrier like it would in previous years. So that's a good part about this tyre construction that Pirelli have. But the tyres are a bit heavier than they were last year. You know, that's why the minimum weight of the cars is now 642 kilograms, if I remember off the top of my head, then 640 like it was last year. And the problem with these tyres though seems to be that our operation window is so tiny, so small this year. Even if they are faster, the operation window is so tiny that everyone's just saving them, really saving them. And even then, the tyres are going off. As I said in the Power Oversteer bingo, watch out for their front in that race recap. How many times did he hear their front? That was quite a lot. How many times was the overtake with DRS? Quite a lot. So there's problems with the tyres, and it's like Pirelli have changed them, and now we've just got to see how these changes work. And I do hope it works out for Pirelli, and whichever tyre manufacturer is going to have this post of having to make these tyres, they would be under they would be under the knife. They would get the sharp end of the stick, no matter whoever it was, if it was Michelin, if it was Bridgestone, to make these 2-3 stock tyres, to make this formula. It's very on a knife edge. It's very variable even, and so I do feel some sympathy for Pirelli, but it looks like they just outsmarted themselves this year with these tyres, and so it's good to see that they are changing it, even if it is them kind of admitting fault with these tyres because of that. So yeah, big loser again, F1. And as I said, most of the passes were DRS down the front straight, and that's not good. I know Spain is a procession most of the time, but when most of your passes are just DRS, and you're going to hear me talk about the overtake of the race, it's actually right at the start of the race. At the start, I don't say that often. I don't hold moves at the start too much in high regard compared to other moves that were really planned out later in the race, but no, they got the move at the start of the race even was really great, and it was a brilliant move that would have been worthy to win over the take of the race in any race so far this year. So might even be my overtake of the year so far. But yeah, Pirelli tyres, I do feel sympathy for them, but any tyre manufacturer in that post was going to get the wrath of the fans if they didn't quite get it right in that 2-3 stock window. And it looks like they didn't in this 4 stock window, partly because we expect different now than we did in 2011, as I said, when we had a similar time in the Spanish Grand Prix with Vettel winning there. So yeah, tyres. I'm going to actually link you to a video below that Harrison 101 HD did on this topic, and he does it much more eloquently than I do, and explains it really good in depth. Talks a bit about the politics behind the scenes as well, and talks a bit about the politics in articles in the news media, talking about why these changes happened. And being a Red Bull fan, or Vettel fan even, yeah, he doesn't look not lightly on it. So yeah, I'll link you to Harrison 101 HD's video below. But let's talk about some good parts of the race. Let's actually talk about the winners, and of course Ferrari. Brilliant race from them, brilliant race from Alonso, domination just like in China, but this time we could actually see the domination because he was in the lead for most of the time, and beating Massa by over 26 seconds. That was a very impressive job from him. And I think the main differences I saw from the drivers in their stint was, while Massa could extract more at the beginning of the stint as much as Alonso, it's just further down the stint Alonso is extracting more than Massa, it seems. So yeah, brilliant job from Alonso on these tyres. 32nd win in F1. Now he's in his sole place in the 4th in the all-time winners list, behind Ayrton on 41, Aaron Prost on 51, and Michael Schumacher on 91, and ahead of Nigel Mansell now on 31. So yeah, brilliant win for Alonso. He's 32nd in F1, and I'm sure there's going to be many more to come. And Massa, great to see him on the podium, really great to see him. And I think, like everyone who's watching F1, we always see Massa as this nice guy. We always hope he does well, and it's great to see him doing well this time. Could he got a second though behind Raikkonen? Yes, he could have, but it looked like Raikkonen was just in that zone in the middle part of the race and kind of pulled a gap on Massa that he couldn't quite catch up in that last part of the race. So yeah, great drive from the Ferrari pair there. Let's talk about Lotus then with Raikkonen. Brilliant drive, but one less pit stop in 3rd. Like Lotus, they really seem to be kind of in the tyres this year, a bit like Sauber were last year, and so they're able to maybe extract more over longer stints, and that in turn that means they have one less pit stop. And so Raikkonen, as I said, in the middle part of the race really got that gap to Massa into quite a manageable gap, and a gap that could have maybe even seen him battle with Alonso at times, but Alonso was just in the zone there. So yeah, Raikkonen, great race from him. Grosjean, unlucky. Suspension fairly. I haven't actually seen any articles why it was. It just seemed to be, manufacturing fault. It just seemed to fail on him, and so that's really unfortunate for Grosjean. He's had a good, solid start to the year. Very good race in Bahrain, of course, and I hope to see him do well in future races. Really has kept his nose clean, and hopefully the pace will come in this European part of the season, and maybe in Monaco. I think that notice will go really well. Maybe he can be up there in like his de facto home race there in Monaco, being the Frenchman, of course, Swiss Frenchman, of course. So yeah, that's Lotus. The other big team, Red Bull, 4th and 5th. They're really disappointed with that, but they extracted the most from that race, and that's all you can ask for, really. If you're not quite there on the pace, extract the most from it, and of course that counts towards the championship. And Red Bull in the business of winning championships. They have been for the past 5 years now, so they did the best they could, and disappointing that they weren't on the podium pace, but I think they got the best out of that race. Mercedes. Where do I start? It's a bit of a reverse of Bahrain actually, and where Rosberg went to pieces and Hamilton drove well. Hamilton went to pieces in this race, Rosberg drove well. So yeah, well, was I? Oh yeah, Mercedes. So yeah, as I said, it was quite a good race for Rosberg, and usually they went for a 3-stop strategy with, a car that, meant to burn up their rear tyres quite fast. So it was a bit strange to see that, and maybe with a 4-stop strategy they might have got a bit more out of that result, maybe even challenge Rebel for 5th, but I think 6th was the maximum that Rosberg could do on either strategy, maybe, anyway. So yeah, 6th place for Rosberg, pretty good result. Hamilton down in 12th, and as he admitted after the race, he didn't know what to do. He was a bit lost in that race, and that's not a good thing to see for Mercedes, especially as they qualified so well, front row lockout, to have such a difference from race car to qualifying car. A huge difference from race car to qualifying car. So that it's really strange to see that, in F1, and we've seen it in the past though, but mainly that's been because of, tyres and tyre wars, and certain cars would, go to this tyre that would work really well on qualifying, but in the race, it wouldn't work so well. But yeah, Mercedes, they have big problems to solve again in race trim, and if they can qualify really well again in Monaco, you never know, they might hold off the field, much like Webber did last year at the end of the race. So yeah, that could be their best chance of winning the race, but really disappointing for Mercedes. Bit of a losers this weekend, even though they're the big winners in qualifying. So that's Mercedes. Let's talk about McLaren, and 8th and 9th. Probably the best they could do, and Button really did well in that second half of the race. As I said, he was down to 17th at one stage at the start, but worked his way up well, and when he had clean air, he was pulling away from the likes of like Hamilton behind him, and so the 3-stop strategy really did work for McLaren there. And Perez, I think, he had one more stop and was right behind Button at the end, but he was told to save his tyres as they wanted to make it to the end of the race. That, of course, we're suspicious in F1 about coded messages, and maybe that was a coded message to say, hold order, because that's what happens often in F1 after like the last stop in, say, the refueling area, and now when after the last tyre stop, teams do want their drivers to hold station. They don't want to risk a result, a good result, especially if it's for McLaren, who are kind of struggling at the moment, and every point counts, and especially in their battle with Force India ahead of them. And that was good points in the end for the team. It seems like they learnt from Bahrain, where they kind of cost themselves quite a few points from their drivers battling. This time they kind of made sure they got the points, so even though it's different parts of the race. So yeah, solid for McLaren maybe, but still losers overall, because we expect much more from McLaren, and this is looking like the mid-90s or the early 2009 car, where they really did struggle with the cars. So yeah, McLaren got lots to do, and those big updates really didn't help out like they planned. Like, I think they have to give up the title talk and concentrate on getting 5th place in the constructors. So the guys they're batting with, Force India, and very good result for the rest there, and very unfortunate for Sitter with that long pit stop at his first stop. Otherwise, he might have been right up there as well. He had very good pace, particularly near the middle and end of the race. So when he had clean air, so yeah, very good race for the rest. They're very happy with that, with the 7th spot, almost 6th, but couldn't quite challenge Rosberg in the end. And it seemed like, you know, DRS was kind of ineffective in the last stint of the race. It seemed, yeah, as I mentioned, there were quite a few battles with Ricardo Gutierrez, Hamilton, Sutil, with the Resta and Rosberg, but they just couldn't find their way past. And yeah, with the tyre playing field kind of more level, it seemed like it was a bit harder to make DRS work. But very solid points for the Resta, and again, getting a good result while Sutil doesn't. And Sutil, he hasn't actually got that many points. I think the most points he got was actually in Australia. That might have been his only points finish. So yeah, very disappointing for Sutil, and hopefully his luck turns round in Monaco, a place he's done quite well in the past, especially in 2008, but unfortunately didn't get the result that day, but I hope he does in this year. So behind them you had Sauber, and big improvement for Sauber it seemed, as Hulkenberg was battling for points there, and Gutierrez leading the race for the first time, and getting fastest lap, you know, in the race, his first fastest lap in F1, and despite the lack of value in fastest lap, it's still good achievement for Gutierrez. He really did show improvement after quite a backlash after his first 4 races, but came back strong at a track he knows really well from Junior Formula, and it seemed to really help him out here. And good, very solid 11th spot, not quite a point, just behind Ricardo, unfortunately at the end, but you know, very good race for him. And Hulkenberg, his race was just ruined by that pit exit into Verne, and I think it was Matt Morris, who one of the designers for the car, chief designer I believe, he said that Hulkenberg kind of didn't know where Verne was going, even though the Toro Rosso pit stop is, you know, behind Sauber as they finish high in the constructors. But yeah, it seemed a bit of a confusion there on that pit stop, and unfortunately it cost Hulkenberg some points maybe in the end, as he was battling with Ricardo, he was battling with Perez, and so yeah, very disappointing for him. But good pace in that Sauber, and it's like they're working on those issues one by one, and it's like a bit of a minor step forward for them. And we didn't hear much about the tyre problems that they had, especially in Bahrain and, you know, Malaysia and China, so that was good to see for Sauber, and it looks like they have taken a bit of a minor step forward now, and hopefully that can carry on for the rest of the year. We had Toro Rosso and Ricardo, who did get that point ahead of Gutierrez. Very good race from Daniel Ricciardo, very solid race. And Jean-Eric Verne, again, he was down there, he's down there again. And then of course he had that pit incident with Hulkenberg, and he was right at the back. Then he had his tyre go to pieces, and you know, he had to pit for that, he's right at the back, and then they just retired him in the end, you know, with the cause of, you know, damage to his car. But I think we all know that it didn't really affect him, but you know, they just wanted to get a new gearbox and make sure they could get all those changes for the next race. But yeah, very good result for Ricciardo, and that pressure might be, you know, starting to transfer to Jean-Eric Verne. You know, Daniel Ricciardo said this before the beginning of the year. This is really a battle this year, you know, especially with maybe Mark Webber's future, you know, uncertain, and more than likely, you know, leaving that Red Bull seat, and they're fighting hard for that. So yeah, very good result for Ricciardo, and continues a very solid start to the beginning of the year. And Toro Rosso, like, they haven't lost out really in Spain with these updates, and it's like they're still right there where they were in the first 4 races, so it's good to see for them. We have Williams, and Williams were disappointing again. From the race they won last year, they've gone from hero to not quite zero, but they're almost back there. And Maldonado 14th, probably the best they could do. I think that's what they said. Bottas 16th, just ahead of Pick, not 16th, 17th I think. Yeah, just ahead of Pick anyway. That's very disappointing that their pace is going back towards Caterham or jumping forward, or, you know, and yeah, just very disappointing. It seemed like Bottas had tyre problems that he pitted quite a few times before times, and it just seemed like he struggled with the tyres this race. So yeah, going to Monaco, I expect Maldonado to do be quite good. That's a track he normally does well. That's one of his banker tracks, a bit like Spa. So I expect Marinado to do quite well in Monaco. Maybe he could just sneak in and get a point there. But yeah, very disappointing for Williams, and it's going to be a hard, long season for them, just like 2011. So that leaves us with the newer teams, Caterham and Marussia. Marussia, solid, but disappointing now that they appear to be behind Caterham. And Caterham, with Pick battling with Bottas, it looks like their pace is right there now. As I said the last race, they're in that slot where they could battle with teams, if they have problems, and teams did have problems here, but they were fighting with Bottas, both of them, the Caterham drivers, Van der Garde early on and Pick at the end. So it looks like they had the pace of a Williams, if the Williams is not having a particularly good race. So that's really good to see that these updates are working for Caterham and working for Marussia as well, because they're both closer to the midfield now. That is really good to see, and they're not quite there yet, maybe, I'm not sure, but especially Van der Garde early on, it appears like they're just there maybe now. But yeah, Van der Garde, great race at the beginning, and it's just unfortunate he had 3 wheels on his wagon in the end, and then he tried to do his best hip hop hydraulic car impression going into the pit lane, which is a bit funny to see. I think everyone's kind of laughed at it, but yeah, very disappointed with Van der Garde in the end, and I think he would have beaten Bottas and he would have been kind of bit far ahead of that battle. So yeah, great race for Van der Garde, just a shame he wasn't rewarded and after that early stint. If he just continued his race pace, as I said, like he had in that first third of the race, and good from Pick as well. So very good signs for Caterham, big winners, and I'll say Marussia minor winners, because both teams are catching up to that midfield. So that's very good to see. So that's the winners and losers. Let's go to of the race. So, driver of the race, and there's quite a few candidates. There's Fernando Alonso, of course, Kimi Räikkönen, and Vettel, maybe Webber, after his poor start, making his way through the field up to 5th. Rosberg for just hanging in there in the Mercedes, De Resta in 7th, Gutierrez in 11th, Ricciardo in 10th as well, maybe even Button in 8th, after again like Webber being low down the order and then working his way up. For Van der Garde, even though he didn't have much of a race in the end. For Pick maybe as well, challenging Bottas for the Caterham drivers basically. But I think it has to be Alonso on home turf. He just dominated that race and he was just sublime. You can't say it any other way. So I'll give it to Alonso's driver of the race, and team of the race is going to Ferrari. I might have actually given it to Caterham if they had remembered to attach 4 wheels to Van der Garde's wagon, but for that they kind of they're kind of second place now. So yeah, I have to give it to Ferrari for getting both cars on the podium and getting corner strategy right. They knew their strategy immediately when they came here. Other teams are grappling with whether to do 3 stops or 4 stops. They knew that it was a 4-stop race. I think on Friday in Ted's notebook he said, and so they could plan around that, plan all their stops, and it worked out brilliantly. They're right up there in the constructors now as well as Alonso in the drivers. So very good race for Ferrari, getting driver and team of the race. And overtake of the race, this is going to another Ferrari guy again. I'm not often going to give it for start moves, but Fernando Alonso move at the beginning round the outside in turn 3 of not one guy but 2 guys, Raikkonen and Hamilton. Just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I was I was jumping on all around the living room in excitement at that move. That was a brilliant move, and perhaps only the only memorable move of the race actually. But yeah, Alonso's move at the start round the outside of Hamilton, and Raikkonen really set him up for the rest of the race where he wasn't stuck behind Raikkonen on that free swap, or Hamilton, who was really struggling with his tyres. It didn't cost him much time, and especially with Vettel being kind of held up by Rosberg as well at times, so he was right behind there and he could just manage his pace at the beginning and work his way up, and of course he got into the lead and won. But yeah, that's a move of a driver who knew that was his chance to do it. That was perhaps his best chance to do it. He had to do it quickly to get past those guys, and he just took it. just drove around the outside, and that was just a brilliant move. And that was my review of the Spanish Grand Prix. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last F1 power oversteer for a while, but I am going to try and get a preview of the Indy 500 out this week before it goes. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this review of the Spanish Grand Prix. Unfortunately, a bit of a negative Spanish Grand Prix again, but hopefully it picks up for F1 in future races with Monaco, and of course with the new tyres from Canada onwards. But salamat for watching, so till next time, cheerio.